Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? Good morning.
Good.
Good. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Hey, Amanda. Hey, Erin. Hey, Sarah.
Good
Welcome
morning.
to PBL.
I'm so glad to see you.
Thank you.
Happy Friday. It's great to see all three of you. You look beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Just a reminder, you are going to be recording this, right? Because we have a lot of people in other time zones that are on West Coast that have all said they want to be here, but it's extra early for them. So we'd love to share the recording with them if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Great.
We are recording. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute. All right, we are going to get started. Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to be here. My name is Sarah Lev, and I am joined by my colleagues and friends, Erin Starkey and Amanda Clark. And all three of us are part of the national faculty with PBLWorks, and we're also authors of the new book called Implementing Project-Based Learning in Early Childhood, Overcoming Misconceptions and Reaching Success. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California, where I am about to begin my 16th year as an early childhood teacher.
My name is Amanda Clark, and I'm joining you from Des Moines, Iowa. I currently am an associate professor of education at Central College in Pella, Iowa. But prior to transitioning to higher education, I was in a project-based learning elementary school for 16 years, where I was a classroom teacher, literacy leader, and instructional coach.
Hi there, I'm Erin Starkey, and I'm coming to you from San Antonio, Texas. 2020 marks the beginning of my 12th year of teaching, and my experience runs from classroom teaching to instructional coaching and technology to curriculum design. And we just wanted to say, Teresa and the PBLMatters team, thank you so much for having us here this morning.
To be a classroom teacher right now is extraordinary, and we mean that literally. It is truly out of the ordinary. And this is especially true for early childhood teachers who have to balance the developmental needs of young children and how they learn best with the current demands to teach remotely and in socially distant ways. So we are really excited to speak with you today about two things that are incredibly important to us: project-based learning and young children. And even if you are here and you're not an early childhood educator, we really hope that elements of our talk today resonate with you, because they do apply, these ideas really do apply to students of any age. So I want to start by telling you a story about a COVID class high school graduate named Lily. Like many high schoolers preparing to graduate, Lily found herself thinking about some of her favorite experiences. And she specifically remembered a project she'd done when she was the director of a music video. She planned the shots, she filmed them, she worked with her classmates who were there. They were the songwriters and the performers and the musicians. And then she worked with an editor who was also a student to cut the video the way she envisioned it. And Lily had said that she felt so proud of what she'd created. She actually said, "I was just so proud to have my name on it," right? Even though it was really hard to make the decisions that she had to make and collaborate with nearly her entire class. She recalled that the project encouraged and motivated out-of-the-box thinking and confidence. And she went on to say that that opportunity to be a director forced her to ask questions, ask for help when she needed it, and it showed her that everyone had something different to offer. So in short, Lily was reflecting on the power of project-based learning to give students agency and to connect them with the world beyond the classroom, leading to deeper and long-lasting learning. PBL is exciting and incredibly empowering for teachers and students. And so I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that Lily learned so much about PBL as she reflected on it. Learned so much through PBL. But it might surprise you to know that when Lily was directing that music video, when she was planning her shots and collaborating with the videographers and the writers and the designers and the editors, when Lily went through that PBL unit, she was 6 years old. Lily was actually a student in my kindergarten class back in 2008. And a few weeks ago, I got an email from her that took my breath away. I was totally surprised to hear from her for the first time in maybe 10 years. And she shared with me her thoughts and her memories about being a part of our classroom as a child in kindergarten and also first and second grade. And her email just beautifully articulated how the activities and the lessons she remembered really encouraged her to think differently than everyone. She went on to tell me through the email how important PBL was to her in her learning, in her growth, in her confidence as she moved through school and life, so much so that she actually sought out a high school that had a strong PBL program. She attributed her confidence and independence as a learner to the opportunities she had in the early grades, beginning in kindergarten. And I want to share with you a little bit about her email, a little of her email. She said, "As a little kid in your class, I just thought we were having fun, and that was how all school was. I now know that your classroom," I'm trying not to cry, I won't cry, "was truly a special and unique place. After 8th grade, I transferred schools. I got into a program called Project Lead the Way, a 4-year PBL engineering course. It was utterly apparent from the first day of freshman year that I had something most of these kids didn't: profound curiosity." She went on to say, "I wanted to know more, know how and know why everything worked and how it did. Simply put, I was excited to learn. I am excited to learn. Thank you for cultivating that." And what you're seeing there on the screen, that image is actually her first grade reflection after being the director, it says director at the top, of what it was like for her, what she learned directing that video. So what Lily's talking about is the respect and the trust that we give young children when we implement PBL with them, even at the earliest grades, even in preschool. Her reflections were poignant and especially meaningful to me because they speak to the values that I hold about young children, that we all do, that children are independent, they are inquisitive, they are always surprising, and that learning has to involve meaningful relationships that happen in community with others, and that children, young children, can and do play an active role in the world. We don't focus on all that children can't do, but rather we need to leverage what they can do, and they really can do so much. And we can see that when Lily talks about curiosity and excitement and thinking differently and feeling overwhelmed, she's describing something we all know well here. For those of you who've gone through PBL 101 and talking about that ideal graduate, right? So this might look familiar to you. Just take a minute and read over a couple of these qualities of what we might call the ideal graduate, right? Like confident, critical thinking, collaboration, compassionate, curious, courageous, independent. These are what Lily was talking about. This is how she sees herself now as a graduate of high school. And she is attributing this to those first days of school in kindergarten. Lily believes that PBL has given her these qualities, right? That this idea of understanding how knowledge and skills are interconnected, a sense of being a lifelong learner. Now, her perspective is an essential one to bring this discussion about why PBL, right? Because she's not just a high school student reflecting on PBL in high school. She is reflecting on what PBL did for her at ages 5, 6, and 7. And this is a time when many people might say, no, we need to focus on foundational skills, right? For literacy, for example, or math. Or they might say, no way, my kids are too needy. They can't even tie their shoes. I've heard that so many times. My kids can't even tie their shoes. How are they going to engage in PBL, right? And yes, in early childhood, children are working on foundational skills. That is true. And yes, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds do need support and guidance. But those are the reasons that we should implement PBL in the younger grades, not why we should shy away from it. So after I got Lily's email while waiting in line for coffee, I shared it with Erin and Amanda, and a few minutes later, while sitting in my car, now fully crying from how moved I was, Erin told me that she too was then crying. And Amanda encouraged me to reach out to Lily and see if we could she would put her thoughts in a blog post for our early childhood PBL website. We thought if we were this inspired and moved, we guessed that other teachers would be too. You know, teachers often think, well, I mean, we hope that all the work that we do with young children makes an impact, right? But we can't really be sure. And then you read a letter like this, it's overwhelming. I actually often think about that when I'm facilitating projects with my kids. Will they remember all this work we're doing? And while I know most probably won't remember the details, I certainly hope the skills and the knowledge will carry over year to year, project to project. And for Lily, they did. So Lily agreed to write the blog for our website, and it is powerful. It's better to go read it yourself. But she ends the piece with the following. Without a doubt, PBL has shaped who I am and will continue to shape who I'm going to become. And to every teacher reading this, thank you for changing the face of education as we know it. All of us Gen Zers appreciate it more than you know. So in my career as a teacher of young children, I facilitated many, many projects ranging from toy designs that the kids made and then they got to be displayed at the Mattel Design Center in LA. We ran our own library out of our classroom when our campus didn't have one. We ran a bakery for the community, and we designed our own outdoor classroom space. And in all of these projects and projects like them, young children are at the center. And most of the time, if I tell people about this work, teachers, parents, administrators, they are usually surprised. They'll be like, how? They're so young. How do they do this? In fact, this sense of surprise at all things that young children can do has really become the cornerstone of my work as an early childhood educator and now as an author.
So our book about implementing project-based learning in early childhood centers around the set of myths the reasons that kids can't do project-based learning, and these assumptions that we hold about young children, and even some barriers, things that teachers share with us in workshops like the one you might be attending, the 101, or other spaces where we've coached teachers. They just constantly remind us and tell us that their children can't do project-based learning. And even though preschool and early childhood classroom teachers are sitting at those same workshops as their colleagues in upper elementary or middle school and high school, we've seen them sitting there shaking their heads or huddled at a table in the back with their arms crossed saying, yeah, I can see this working for those students, but will never work for my students. My kids can't do this. And actually, they can. We heard it from Lily's story, and we saw it in those pictures that Sarah shared from her classroom. Yes, they can, and we're here to tell you about that because we have experiences planning our projects too, projects for our students. And we've coached teachers as they develop project-based learning units for their students and in our work with school leaders. But we do understand it can feel challenging and it can seem impossible. These concerns and worries and challenges that we hear often hold teachers back from implementing project-based learning with their children. But over and over, when we dig in and we ask teachers, why are you feeling this way? Or what are you afraid of? We ultimately find out that these fears are rooted in these misconceptions. Misconceptions about students and misconceptions about project-based learning.
And overcoming these misconceptions is key to helping young children reach success. We feel so strongly about this that we wrote a book. And we have focused our work on these issues specific to early childhood, PBL. And today we want to dispel those myths and break down barriers so that all children experience what Lily is describing. These opportunities to have ownership over their learning and to engage with learning that means something to them from the moment that they enter school until they graduate. Yes, but beyond our classrooms as well. As you listen to some of these common misconceptions, we hope you will try to visualize how PBL can work for you, for your students in your classroom. Because although we all teach and work in different settings, PBL is a teaching approach that can be leveraged in any context.
So we are going to take you through a few of these myths and misconceptions that we've heard, commonly heard from different teachers and educators. So one of the first ones we always hear is they hear about, you've heard about these design elements, and one of the key essential design elements is voice and choice. And teachers will say, no, I need to keep control of my classroom so that learning can happen. And giving students so much choice feels too chaotic. And almost every workshop that I've facilitated, I kind of overhear teachers say, okay, voice and choice, I get that. For older students, I can see doing that, but for younger kids, they might need a more control or less voice and choice. So let's take that on, right? This idea of control for young children. Really, control is a bit misguided. It's not really about control, it's about engagement. Because when you design a project that is developmentally appropriate, that is authentic, that is engaging, you don't need to control a situation anymore because your kids are wanting to work and wanting to be a part of it. Really, an engaging project is your best classroom management tool, right? So let me give you an example of a question a lot of teachers have about giving voice and choice in terms of teams and roles. So actually, this is Lily's project, the music video project that we did way back when. When you make a music video, there's tons of jobs, right? There's singers and choreographers, there's the songwriters and musicians. And it would have been pretty easy for me to decide who was doing what. I know my kids, I know what they're good at, right? I can make all these kind of projections. And I probably do a pretty good job, but maybe not as best as they can do. So it's so different if you ask kids, even 5-year-olds, what do you like to do? What are you good at? What are your strengths? And what do you want to know more about, right? They know this. They can answer these questions. And it's so important when we make groups and we make teams to give kids those choices. You can still keep a little bit of what you might say control by doing something like this. You guys put your top 3 choices, and I promise I will give you one of them, right? And then that's what I did with the music video. And then you can kind of make groups, but we want to really be careful that we're not always deciding for kids where we think the best place for them should be. Because again, if they make those decisions and they have a say in what they're doing, there's going to be so much buy-in and therefore more engagement, and then it's going to be easier to manage that project. So remember, when you're thinking about this idea of control, it's really not about that as much as engagement and voice and choice.
Another one we so often hear is one that feels really familiar. Before I could start a project, I'd have to teach too many things to get them ready. We've all felt that pinch, that nagging wonder of, did I cover enough material? How am I going to get these standards covered? Are my kids reading yet? Are they writing? Are they going to be ready for that next grade level? What is this going to look like? What about the next checkpoint or observation or report card? PBL is just going to have to wait. It's going to have to wait. I've got to get them ready. But we encourage you to push back on the idea that you have to front load content, that you can only use PBL once students are fully ready. They know enough, and so they're ready for PBL. Have you noticed, as children often do, how nearly everything, every academic area, is actually interrelated? Enter the concept of integration. Try to look at all the different ways you can utilize the different tools and structures you're already doing. Help students uncover the concepts and the content and help them apply those skills in the project work. As you develop the projects, be mindful of the skills and the key standards and the learning goals that you want them to develop. Rather than teaching or compartmentalizing or front-loading and blocking off subjects, look instead at places that they connect. Develop wherever you can opportunities in your classroom for children to experience the integration that they already notice and they already see in the world beyond the classroom. When we do this, teaching and learning suddenly feels so inspiring. We're excited. We have that joy of teaching and learning, and so do our students. When we seek to integrate learning, our curriculum becomes richer and more purposeful.
Another myth that we write about in our book is one that we often hear connected to literacy, but most importantly about research. Project-based learning seems to involve a lot of research, and my students, they're too young to research on their own. And we think that a lot of this is fueled by a narrow definition of research. Many teachers believe that research, and we might even just air quote that, research is synonymous with looking up facts in a book or Googling something on the internet. However, as you see on the slide, that actually research has more definitions. And none of them say, look it up on the internet and read it. So we have to expand our understanding of really what constitutes research to open our eyes to a wide variety of options, especially with our youngest learners. So looking at definition number 2, I think you'll see some overlap with the materials we've been learning this week in the workshop. We want students to engage in sustained inquiry or a studious inquiry, especially investigations and experiments. So what that means is that we can plan hands-on activities in our classroom where students research. They engage in that inquiry process, or setting up an investigation or an experiment. Taking the students to the marine biology lab at the local high school, or having a Q&A with performers at the Civic Center, all of those are opportunities for the students to engage in research. We want them to discover new things. But the key to success in overcoming this misconception is to help the students prepare. So that might include brainstorming some questions. It might giving opportunities to simulate what's going to happen on a field experience. Perhaps they need some preliminary information about a topic, and just to really get their curiosity sparked so that the research lands well with them and they can make those strong connections. So we know that research is a strong component of the inquiry process and sustaining that inquiry. So you can see here a project that I did with my students where we researched not by Googling and not by collecting all of these facts. So I brought in a naturalist to talk to the students about the declining population of the monarch butterflies. But to prepare the students, I presented them with a startling statistic, and then we used our math tools to really unpack what those numbers meant. And in literacy time, we investigated what does it mean to be endangered and extinct, so that the students had a place and a purpose for understanding what would happen if we didn't support the monarch butterfly population. And then most importantly, as I prepared the students, we sent Miss Cindy a list of questions in advance. And you can see she's holding that list of questions and she's prepared to speak to what the students are wondering. So we didn't ask her to give a canned program. We wanted to really research and to have the students feel their questions were owned by the expert and that we could move forward. And after she visited, we reflected on those questions and we returned to the need to know lists. And just giving those students that experience of research through a simulation, through seeing live specimens, as you see she's holding that butterfly in front of the students, and hearing their questions being answered. So research is the key component to a project, but how we get students to do that, that's up to us. It's beyond the book and beyond Google. So we want them to participate. Absolutely, young children can participate, but we have to support them in formulating and articulating the questions and then seek to find a lot of different ways that they can engage with that research.
So another big misconception we often hear is, well, my students can't read or write yet. How can they do projects? And this misconception that, we're actually, students are readers and writers. They're emergent readers and writers, right? So even when children enter preschool and kindergarten, they have so many skills that are a big part of literacy, right? Children, first of all, children play, right? Play is the foundation of literacy. Storytelling, dramatic play, block building, these are all a part of literacy. And then, you've got drawing and representing their ideas, also a part of foundation of literacy and writing. So we want to really leverage those things. Those are a big part of being readers and writers, and not to mention speaking and listening skills as well, which is a huge part of literacy that PBL can really support. So again, we're not saying that phonics and word study are not important to be taught in isolation. They certainly are, and research shows that, in the early grades, children need standalone time to be working on those skills. But what we're also saying is that those elements and beyond can be integrated into a project in really purposeful, meaningful ways. And that meaning and purpose often inspires kids to be really super motivated to develop their skills in literacy. Because they see a context, right? There's a relevant context and they have that ownership, and it's just such an essential part of every single project, right? There is no project in early childhood that doesn't address or incorporate some type of literacy. So let me tell you a little bit about a project that I did in the fall with my students. They were really, really interested in businesses, and specifically, well, they got to the bakery eventually, but this was just us talking about their experiences of businesses and what a business was. And what that poster that you see, that's Chanel, she's 4. And I asked the children we had a conversation about what kind of businesses they knew about and what they'd experienced, and then to go and draw a picture of a business that they'd been to, and then even what that business was doing. What were they selling? What were they offering? And they went ahead and drew the pictures, and then we all had a big discussion, and then they watched me write the words to every picture, again, incorporating literacy. And then I hung that chart on our project wall. And the next day during our choice time, Chanel went up to the wall and she said to me, what's this word? And I said, oh, that's milk. And she said, I want to read that word. I want to write that word. And I said, all right, go ahead, take that word off and let's write it. And so you can see the second picture is she had pulled the sticky note off and she was looking at the words and learning to write them, learning to spell them. Now that's copying. And I would say that's not exactly, I don't do a ton of copying in my classroom, but this was a little bit different. I wasn't asking her to copy these words. She wanted to learn how to spell that word and read it. And as she was doing that, she was learning about letters and sounds and words. You'll notice the word client there. That's because another person talked about how his dad was a lawyer and had clients. Now, again, if we're limiting kids' ideas, do you think they're ever going to talk about the word client and what a client is? We had some good discussions about that. You know, what is a client? What is insurance, right? What is a lawyer? These all came up, right? So this idea of kids can't engage in projects because they don't read or write is just, I don't even know what they can, right? We're integrating all of these skills, you know, and then again, with reading, we'll take a trip and write a book about our experience. And then I can't even tell you how destroyed our class books are from all the times that my kids are reading those every day to each other. They are memorizing them. They are identifying words and concepts. And this is all because they care about what they are reading and writing. And so there are so many opportunities to integrate purposeful literacy in our projects so that kids really can engage with those ideas.
Often we hear teachers saying, my kids are too needy and they can't work together. We have to teach these social and emotional skills, and those need to be taught before we can engage well in project-based learning. And if we know anything right now with a flood of research coming out, is that social and emotional learning is key. We're looking at teaching not just content, but so much of our students. And what does this look like? So we suggest that PBL is actually one of the most effective ways to teach these SEL skills and competencies because they're naturally embedded within a project. Presenting learners with authentic problems and questions to answer, it creates an environment conducive to independence and to collaborating effectively. It encourages students to apply these skills beyond just our classroom. So those unstructured times, they become full of positive interactions. They become full of caring and these chances to talk well and to listen and to hold others' perspectives. Because in the classroom, you've given them these opportunities. So one of the tools that you may be familiar with at this point, PBL Ohio, is the project path. And it's what came to mind as we were talking through SEL and what this looks like and how is it truly embedded. And we think about when they learn a project, our students are dependent in bringing us their wonders. They share what they need to know. They know what they need to be successful, and they share that with us, thinking independently about their needs. They begin collaborating effectively in the team building activities. We get our teams together. We've got to get them working together from day one. So they get in those teams and they talk about, well, what do we need to do in order to be successful? And what jobs should we have? And who's responsible for these roles? They learn what it is to collaborate, not just cooperate. They collaborate. And as we move down into the building knowledge and understanding phase, children learn what it means to become independent as they develop strategies to move through challenges. Or they set goals for themselves, or they reflect on their learning. And they do this with peers sometimes. They do this by themselves, and they do it with us. But each thing that they learn helps them further develop their products as they collaborate together and utilize key skills like listening to each other's ideas and taking turns. They learn to respect each other, and once again, because we all have to come together to create our products that we're proud of, we've got to hold space for each other's perspectives, for each other's opinions, and for each other's needs. And that building knowledge phase does that naturally. And then how better to collaborate and learn to listen effectively than to develop and critique together. We learn how to give and receive effective feedback. We teach our students through protocols. We teach them through structures, what this looks like, what it sounds like, to give specific, helpful, and kind feedback. Thank you, Rod Berger. To move our project work forward. What's so neat, too, about this final phase of the project is that our students get to showcase their work and their learning. And they further develop their agency and the greater senses of confidence, like you heard in Lily's story. She's a confident young woman now. And that happened because her curiosity was held tantamount to what they were doing. And these skills of collaboration and independence were built into the work they were doing. So once again, yes, young children are developing these social and emotional skills. They're early on. But that's what the power of PBL is. It allows teachers to explicitly scaffold these skills into the project context.
One more myth that we want to share with you that we often hear is my students will be too nervous to get up in front of a big audience and present what they've learned. And when we dig into this, we find that this misconception is more about project-based learning than the students. It doesn't have to be a big show or a big performance. And some reason, somehow in our culture, creating a big to-do is what we do in project-based learning. But we want to debunk that myth, especially from the lens of the early childhood classroom. So we recognize that we've spent a lot of time on a project and we need to culminate, or we want to take our products to the public, right? The public products you've been learning about this week. But it doesn't mean it has to be a big to-do. So we want students to have some voice and choice in who would make a good audience for their public product. I know as you're designing and planning, you're already thinking, who is an authentic audience and who needs to know this information, and how can we bring that to those folks? And so as you see in these pictures, my students and I did what we called a bike rodeo. And so we planned an opportunity for the students to learn about bike safety. And then this was a planning type of project. And as we were discussing it, the students realized that the most authentic audience were other students like themselves. They didn't need to get up on a stage or prepare a speech or make something to share what they learned with their parents or with an outside audience that already knew the rules of the road. And so it came from them, the idea to host their own bike rodeo. And through that planning process, they discovered what they would need to say. And they had to practice that, and how they would arrange the parking lot space, and how they would check that their friends, their classmates, kids on the playground with them, were going to be safe on their bikes. And so they weren't nervous. They understood the content. It was meaningful to them. It was relevant to them. And they taught each other first in the classroom, and then they took it to a wider audience, one that really needed to know that information. So public products can be presented in so many different ways. They absolutely can stand up and share. They can speak into a microphone, and with scaffolding and support, you will be right there to give them the tools they need, much like Lily spoke about. You might display your work at a building. We've made boxes of historical materials and left them at the historical building before. Class books, maybe you make a second copy and the audience is the school itself, and you deliver that to the school library. And public products can also be simulations or remote opportunities as we head into the fall of teaching and learning. But we want you most to remember that it's more about providing students an outlet to share and less about the presentation of that product. So as we think about overcoming all of these misconceptions, it's really about changing our beliefs about what young children can do. And we may have to change our mindset or understanding about what project-based learning really is, just like that last myth showed us. And we have to believe that it will work with young children. And then through your work and your research and other avenues, you can uncover some instructional approaches that will work with our youngest learners. And project-based learning, we truly believe will work no matter what context you are in.
And that's a good thing, because we don't really know what context we will be in this coming year, right? And we don't know what is going to happen. So, and this sense of unknown can create a kind of imbalance for teachers, right? But when we hold true to the values of project-based learning, we can kind of regain that sense of equilibrium in our planning. So this is a photo of, you might recognize the seesaw of a PBL unit that I did last spring. You know, and it was new for me. And, you know, it's funny, a friend of mine shared Lily's blog, the blog that she wrote. And somebody wrote in, a teacher wrote in, "I love this," referring to the blog, "I love this, but at the same time, it makes me sad. How are we going to embody PBL this year? Even if we do it remotely, it's not the same." And that is true. It won't be the same, but it's still something valuable. And we need PBL more than ever now. I mean, just this summer, I've been so heartened seeing teachers and organizations like PBLWorks mobilizing and innovating around how to do PBL remotely, right? We're connecting with one another, we're exploring new ideas, we're leveraging our strengths, just like you've all been doing this past week, right? I'm guessing this past week you've been planning for multiple scenarios, right? Considering a variety of perspectives, thinking out of the box, actually applying those very same ideal graduate qualities that we aspire for our students. And that's what I had to do last spring. You know, I've used PBL for my entire teaching career, but the idea of teaching remotely to 5-year-olds was brand new for me. And I gave it a shot, right? And even in this context, my students surprised me. And even though our class wasn't together in person, all of my students engaged in the project. They collaborated and, you know, used tools like Seesaw and Flipgrid and Zoom. Those tools are great to make PBL happen. Being open to the unknown was essential, right? And that's certainly going to continue to be the case moving forward, right? In this moment, the educational landscape is shifting beneath our feet faster than we can keep up. You know, but as teachers, we are challenged to embrace change, to lean into discomfort, to really reignite what we know to be true about how young children learn best. And we have to be ready for that surprise. The surprise from our students, from our colleagues, from our projects, and from ourselves. We are gonna surprise ourselves. And whether your classroom environment is in person, online, or somewhere in between, it is essential that young children participate in meaningful and authentic learning experiences. And for us, that means PBL. So we hope that the stories that we shared today of young children engaging in PBL demonstrate that there is so much that they can do. You may have been surprised at the depth or the complexity of some of the projects that you heard us share, or things you saw in the photos. I know that I am continuously surprised by my kids as they learn and grow when we engage in PBL. So as we move into this time of unknown possibilities, as we reimagine education, we must remember that there are some things that will remain constant. All children, all young children, deserve an education that inspires curiosity and inquiry. All young children deserve an education that encourages critical thinking and problem solving. And all young children deserve an education that empowers them to become independent learners. We can give them that. We can give them what they deserve. We have to. We owe it to young children to honor and respect all that they can do as they learn about the world and they learn about themselves. And if you learn a little bit about yourself along the way, don't be surprised.
We are excited to partner with you on this journey of early childhood project-based learning. So if you're interested in learning more about how to conduct project-based learning with early learners, you can head over to our website, earlychildhoodpbl.com, or grab that QR code on your screen. On our website, you'll find lots of blogs like Lily's that highlight the stories of PBL taking place in our early childhood classrooms. And you'll also find project plans for the home-based project that Sarah described that she did this spring remotely. And then we also have one in the development phase for this fall. So feel free to check back for those project ideas.
And we know that we're better together. So we'd love to connect with you. As you head into this fall, as unknown as it may be, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And we'd love to connect. And we'd love to support you on your journey as we grow together in early childhood project-based learning and making this meaningful for all of our students.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day 3 if you're in PBL, Ohio.
Well, thank you. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Learned a lot.
All right. We love it. Have a great day.
You as well.
Bye.
Bye.